I entered the emergent stage when I was 3 years old and I began preschool. My schoolwork here consisted of small drawings and papers where my teachers would translate my drawings back and write it down for my parents to see. My mom reflected that I would often pretend to read by looking at pictures and making up stories as I went along. I would also pretend to write in journals and notebooks, but in reality, I was really just making scribbles and swirls that to me resembled cursive. Growing up, my mom and dad would read to me every night, my favorite books being Is Your Llama a Llama and any of the Dr. Seuss books. When I was around 5 years old, I entered kindergarten. My older siblings had a tutor, and I wanted to work with her too, so I started to work with a tutor named Miss Tammy, who helped me become more familiar with the alphabet and helped me practice my reading and writing skills that I was learning in kindergarten. This is when I entered the letter name alphabetic stage. My parents remember me being a little late to reading on my own, and I cannot recall having a strong desire to read on my own. Maybe this was because I loved having my parents read to me. I'm the youngest of 4, and this caused me to be a late bloomer because I always had older siblings who wanted to help me do things, which I believe led to a later developed self-efficacy. My mom reflected that I started reading books on my own around the 1st grade, making me about 6 years old. When I was in the 1st grade, I struggled with my reading and writing skills and would have to be pulled out of class to work in a resource room at my elementary school. I remember doing small writing and reading assignments that would end in us receiving a small snack or treat to reward our extra work. During this time, my work reflected the use of one-syllable words and small familiar numbers. I was within word pattern stage around the end of 1st grade and into 2nd grade. 2nd grade is where I remember the most of my reading and writing practices. My teacher was incredible this year and collected our work into portfolios that I was able to look back on for this project. The beginning of 2nd grade, my writing was largely spaced out with multiple spelling errors. I would try to use vocabulary that matched the prompt. There was practice with punctuation visible with errors. My work I created towards the end of the 2nd grade had clear improvements with word spacing, better sentence structure, and more accurate use of punctuation. During this time, I was using R-controlled words, common long vowels, and more complex consonants. My report card from the end of the 2nd grade reflected that I was proficient in all reading and writing categories, meaning that I was consistently and independently meeting grade level standards. 3rd grade is when I was in the syllables and affixes stage. In the 3rd grade, I learned cursive, and I remember practicing new cursive letters first thing in the morning in my classroom. In the 3rd grade, we did a lot of work with poetry and did a full unit where we chose a poem from Shel Silverstein's Falling Up to memorize and recite for the class. When I was in the 3rd grade, I do remember reading The Little Girl's Bible Storybook by Carolyn Larson every night by myself, as I loved the illustrations, and by the end of the 3rd grade, I was reading Junie B. Jones' books passed down from my sister. I found a sheet of paper that laid out the curriculum from the 3rd grade. It showed that within the year, we would be using the 6 traits of writing being voice, idea and content, organization, word choice, sentence structure, and mechanics in writing. In reading, we were working on asking questions, determining what was important within text, making connections, reading with fluency, making inferences, visualizing, and synthesizing information. In the 4th grade, I read any Magic Treehouse book I could find and a few other shorter chapter books. In 4th grade, my writing reflected clearer organization of ideas into paragraphs, lots of descriptive words, and a large focus on word meaning. There are also a lot of examples of similes and other poetic writing forms here. Looking at 2 graded writing rubrics from this grade, it was reflected that I was scoring at 3 out of 4. My writing was good but not great. I had details that were limited but relevant, lots of general observations, small falters in organization. I was selecting appropriate words, using simple but accurate sentence structure, and was clearly communicating my points. Looking back, it was clear I was in the derivational stage, moving from the end of elementary school through my middle school and high school years. In middle school, the peak of my reading interest was reached. I was reading series of books like Pretty Little Liars, The Hunger Games, The Selection, the Divergent trilogies, and any John Green book I could get my hands on, like The Fault in Our Stars, Looking for Alaska, and Paper Towns. I really enjoyed reading during this time in my schooling. In high school, my reading mainly was focused around assigned books and literature for class that would always require a follow-up project or research essay. I took a class in high school dedicated to spelling and learning vocabulary words that we might run into on the ACT or SAT that focused on Greek and Latin roots within words and continued to grow my vocabulary throughout other courses in high school. I always scored well in my English classes in high school, ending each semester with an A, and I really came to enjoy these classes where I could mix my skills in reading and writing together. I was able to bring these writing skills with me to college and continue to use these literacy strategies that I learned throughout my schooling today.